I think for some of us, in order for us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And in 1986, I was 24 years old, and I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. And I was negotiating a turn, and there was a police officer waving me on to make the turn, but he had his back to the oncoming traffic. So the moment I made the turn, a truck going very fast ran me over, basically. And I broke 6 vertebrae in my spine and had bone fragments on my spinal cord, and the neural arch, the arch that the spinal cord passes through was broken like a pretzel. So I had quite a bit of neurological problems and objective findings that warranted a typical surgery called a Harrington rod surgery. And that's where they cut off the back parts of your vertebrae, and they screw in these long stainless steel rods. And in my case, it would be from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. And then they take some bone fragments from your hip and they paste it over the top and they hope for the best. And well, I had 4 opinions from 4 of the leading surgeons in Southern California, and they all said, you know, if you don't have the surgery, you'll never walk again. So, you know, I just couldn't agree to that prognosis, and I was willing to take a chance, and I had this idea that I wasn't going anywhere, I wasn't doing anything, I was laying face down, and I was in a lot of trouble. And I said, there's an intelligence giving me life. Can't see it, can't smell it, can't taste it, can't feel it, but it's doing all these biological functions. It knows a whole lot more than I know. It has a will much greater than my will. It has a mind much greater than my mind. It has a love for life that's much greater than my love for life. I thought, well, if my will could match its will, if my mind could match its mind, if my love for life could match its love for life, maybe it would answer the call. So I decided to forego the surgery and make contact with this intelligence and give it a very specific plan, a template, a design. And I understood at the time that this consciousness is an awareness, and awareness is paying attention. So it was paying attention to me. So if I started to reconstruct my spine, and all of a sudden I started to think about if I was going to be in a wheelchair the rest of my life, should I sell my home, I would lose the image or the picture of what I wanted. I'd have to start all over again. And I learned something really key back then, because I think when we're in crisis, we tend to focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do, because I would start out with really good intentions, and then I'd get frustrated or impatient or angry, and then it would make it worse and take me hours and hours to reconstruct my spine. But I never gave up. You know, I just said I have no other alternative. And every single day I would go inward, and I would say to the observer, take a look at this. This is exactly what I want. And I would dimensionalize my spine, and if I lost my attention, I'd stop and start all over again. And it took me about 6 or 7 weeks to finally go through the whole entire thing without losing my attention. It was like hitting a tennis ball right in the sweet spot. I just knew that something happened. And from that moment on, what took me 3 hours to do, I was able to do in 45 minutes. And at the same time, I started to notice some very significant changes in my body and in my health. And I started to feel better, my pain levels went away, my symptoms changed, and I knew that I was onto something. So I just made a deal with myself that if I was ever able to walk again, I'd spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter. I was back on my feet in 10 weeks and back to my life in 12 weeks, and since 1986, that's what I've been doing. The only thing that's fixed is if you live in an unchanging environment. In other words, if you do everything the same, don't expect your biology to change. I mean, even the research that was done years ago, they used to say that you don't grow any new neurons. Well, that's because they were studying rats in an unchanging environment, and the rats never had any new stimulation, so their brains stayed the same. Put rats in an enriched environment, and they have denser brains, more neurological connections, more neurons, more growth chemicals. So the same thing applies to us. I mean, so then when we teach people then how to begin to enact change, they understand what change is, why change is so hard. And you then begin to have them be defined by an internal state as opposed to an external state. We should measure those changes to see if they're real. And I'm happy to say that we've measured significant significant changes in people's health, from cancer to diabetes to MS to lupus to thyroid conditions to chronic pain to tumors to rare genetic disorders that medical science had no solution for, not once, not twice, but many times. And so it's beginning to become a trend. And my fascination after my injury was in studying spontaneous remissions. When I wrote my first book, I really wrote the book because Evolve Your Brain was the book, and I wanted to demystify the process of how these people had spontaneous remissions from disease, and I found the commonalities. After I found the commonalities, I thought, well, we should be able to teach this to people to see if it actually works. And so I wrote my second book, Breaking the Habit. We started to see people starting to change. And then when the changes started happening right in the events, right in our seminars, people getting up and that were had MS for 20 years and were in a wheelchair, standing up right after an exercise or a meditation, and walking without any paralysis, I knew that we were signaling genes in real time right in our workshops. And the moment I knew that, I knew it was time to start measuring it. And if we could measure it then, we could begin to then demystify the process and teach it better. So we created these events called Information to Transformation. I believe, and I think I know now, that if you give people information and they learn it, they're going to make new connections in their brain. That's what learning is. If they can repeat it, they're wiring it in their brain and they're creating a model, and the circuitry is a reflection of the model that they're understanding. If you then can give them some instruction to show them how to apply that information, and they can assign meaning to what they're doing, if they can get their behaviors to match their intentions, if they can get their actions equal to their thoughts, if they get their mind and body working together, they should have some type of transformation. If we can measure that transformation and interpret the measurements, that's more information for us to teach transformation the next time. And we can begin to close the gap between knowledge and experience. So the cool thing is you don't have to be a Buddhist monk. You don't have to be a nun of 40 years of devotion. You don't have to be an academic. You don't have to be a scholar. You don't have to be a Kabbalistic rabbi. You can be a common person. You can be a single mother of 3 children. You can learn how to do this and begin to change your life. Are you talking about the placebo or how to teach the placebo? Separates the conscious mind from the subconscious mind is the analytical mind. Some people have a more developed analytical mind, which means that they analyze everything and not a lot of information makes it through to the subconscious. Other people have a very thin veil between their conscious mind and their subconscious mind, and they're more suggestible to things. Now, suggestibility is your ability to accept, believe, and surrender to an idea or a thought or some information without any analysis. The moment you don't analyze it and you accept, believe, and surrender, that thought begins to go right into the autonomic nervous system, and it begins to change people's biology. So, as an example, someone's given a diagnosis. For the most part, most people, the moment they get a diagnosis, they either feel fear or depression. And now their body emotionally is in that state. Exactly. So now the person then can think positively all they want. But if they're feeling fear or they're feeling sadness, that's mind and body in opposition. So then if you can then help a person, again, move into an elevated emotion, and they start to change their emotional state, they'll accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to their emotional state. And they'll begin to program their autonomic nervous system into that destiny. In other words, getting people beyond their fears, getting them beyond their sadness, beyond their analytical mind. Turns out we know the ways that actually do that in meditation. We know how to sustain that state. We know how to teach people how to shut off their analytical mind and open the door between their conscious mind and their subconscious mind. We've measured it enough times.
Going into the alpha gamma state.
Exactly. So then they have to be able to regulate and control the brainwaves. But we're not just looking for moving into alpha. We want a very coherent, synchronized form of alpha. And the more organized and synchronized it is, the more coherent the message is getting into the autonomic nervous system. So then once the person then do it over and over again, it begins to become a skill. And we've measured this in our students. Some of them slip into that state in 2 seconds, in 4 seconds, in 5 seconds, in 9 seconds, 13 seconds, 21 seconds. They know how to do it. They've done it enough times that it's become a skill. Now, I think there's questions in ethics and morality. I'm weighing what I know against what I don't know. It's an analytical mind is a healthy thing. But when it becomes overly analytical, and you're living by the vigilance of the stress hormones, and well, actually those 70% of those thoughts that are driven by the hormones of stress actually drive your brainwaves into not only a beta brainwave state, what's called a high beta brainwave state. Now, high beta means now you're overly analytical. You're analyzing everything. And you're actually moving your brain further away from the operating system where true change can take place. So high beta is anxiety, high beta is depression, high beta is vigilance, high beta is worry, high beta is insomnia, it's OCD, it's obsessive compulsive. It's all of those things. People get locked in a certain state of where they can't shift gears in their brain. So then they use drugs, they shop, they gamble, they do whatever they can to reduce their emotional state, their internal state, because they're relying on something outside of them. So then we've given people the skills and the tools to begin to then, and it takes a little bit of practice, and it takes a little bit of work, and it takes a little bit of learning. But once you understand how to do it, you know when you're there and when you're not. So to answer the question, when you understand that how programmed people are, you give someone a pill, and that pill is, has a certain name that you can't pronounce. You can't pronounce it, you're going to give your power away to that pill because you're going to believe it's more powerful than you. If you charge more for pharmaceuticals, it works better. If you name it certain things that rhyme with, there's no coincidence that Viagra rhymes with Niagara Falls. That's a lot of flow. There's no coincidence that Rogaine rhymes with grow and gain. It's a way to program the subconscious. So then, we're all conditioned to believing that we need something outside of us to change how we feel inside of us. But I'm asking people to change that conditioning into believing that we have all the resources within us to begin to produce measurable changes. Now, some people do it by thought alone. Other people in our work are still treating conventionally or unconventionally and doing the work at the same time, and the efficacy of their health begins to change even faster because now they're assisting the process to a greater degree. So then people will only, in terms of suggestibility, will accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts equal to their emotional state. And they will never accept, believe, and surrender to the thoughts that are not equal to their emotional state. Because no new information can come into the nervous system that isn't equal to the emotion. Change the person's emotional state to gratitude.